Support comes from Mosby Building Arts, designing custom bathrooms that fit every personal style. More at callmosby.com.
This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha. This past Saturday, an abortion took place in a Missouri Planned Parenthood clinic, something that hasn't happened since 2022. What makes this even more remarkable is that more than 3 months have passed since voters here approved Amendment 3, which added abortion as a protected right in the Missouri Constitution. But the will of those voters hasn't been enough. Since the U.S. Supreme Court's 2022 decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, abortion has become an interstate battleground of access and restrictions. With states like Missouri banning the practice in almost all circumstances, neighboring Illinois has accepted patients who must travel sometimes hundreds of miles to receive care. Last Friday, a ruling was issued that changes things for Missourians seeking an abortion. Here to talk about where things stand and how abortion opponents are reacting, I'm joined by St. Louis Public Radio health reporter Sarah Fentem. Sarah, welcome back to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So Sarah, before we get to this ruling, give us a reminder of what the legal situation has been since voters approved Amendment 3. And as a reminder here, this was a ballot measure that voters passed in November, and it enshrined the right to abortion in Missouri's Constitution. Amendment 3 didn't bring abortion back, right? Mm-hmm. Why?
Yeah, I think a lot of people thought that once Amendment 3 happened that, the next day abortion was going to come back. But legal things have to happen in order for that to take place. And so immediately after Amendment 3 was passed, Planned Parenthood sued Missouri with the hopes of overturning the ban because it was now against the Constitution. And so a Kansas City judge named Jerry Jung in December issued an order that overturned temporarily halted the ban. It still has to go through sort of more formal trial process. Mm-hmm. But when she did that, she left some other requirements that apply to abortion clinics in place. And in Missouri, in order to be an abortion clinic, you have to adhere to certain licensing requirements. Mm-hmm. And for example, a clinic needs to confirm pregnancies with a lab test, and probably most controversially, providers need to give pelvic exams to patients who want an abortion. And Planned Parenthood officials argued that the pelvic exam in particular isn't ethically or medically necessary, and so refused to offer abortions if they had to perform them. And so while those licensing requirements were still in place, Planned Parenthood was saying, even though Amendment 3 passed, we're still not offering abortions until these licensing requirements are removed.
Mm-hmm. And one of the licensing requirements that actually stuck out to me was about doorways, right?
Oh, yeah. So, obviously there are the clinical requirements, the lab test, controversially the pelvic exam. But there's also design requirements, stuff like hallway widths, doorway widths. And what happened was with those requirements in place, a lot of the clinics in the state could not adhere to those and shut down, mm-hmm. which is something that we've seen, which is even before the Dobbs decision in 2022, a lot of the clinics in Missouri had stopped offering abortions, and there was only one, that clinic in the Central West End here in St. Louis, was still providing abortions, and even then not really that many, because we're so close to Illinois, which has much less onerous requirements for mm-hmm. abortion providers.
Now, one of the things that Judge Jerry Jung said is that the requirements were discriminatory. So are these rules somehow applied in a different way to abortion clinics, opposed to other facilities?
In a decision that was that Judge Jung released last Friday, some background, Planned Parenthood had asked the judge after she issued that December ruling mm-hmm. to reconsider these licensing requirements. What Planned Parenthood had said was that these were sort of the same as a ban because they are so restrictive, and they're also discriminatory because they apply only to abortion clinics and not to similar sort of ambulatory centers that offer colonoscopies, even miscarriage care. And Judge Jung did exactly that. She reconsidered and then on Friday issued that ruling that said, actually, these licensing requirements are against Amendment 3, and so put a temporary hold on them, which means now we are where we are, where at least certain clinics in Missouri can start to offer abortions again because those licensing requirements are put on hold, at least temporarily.
So the judge's order, it did have some immediate impact. This allowed a Planned Parenthood clinic in Kansas City to perform an abortion just this past Saturday morning. And the Kansas City Star reported that this was the clinic's first abortion since 2018. So this predates the Dobbs decision. And Selena Sandoval, who's the associate medical director at Planned Parenthood Great Plains, was quoted in that Kansas City Star article as saying, "We were able to finally put into action what the voters asked for back in November." So, Sarah, for many years, St. Louis had the only operating abortion clinic in the state. So what is it that we know now about when abortion is coming back to St. Louis?
So I just got back from Planned Parenthood and talked to their CEO about what to expect. And so for some background, there are 2 Planned Parenthood affiliates in Missouri. There's Planned Parenthood Great Plains, which is the sort of like Kansas City, and then Kansas, I think Oklahoma, don't quote me on that. And then we have Planned Parenthood Great Rivers, which is St. Louis and the Metro East. And so those are sort of the 2 organizations that we're talking about. Planned Parenthood Great Rivers has said that they plan to start offering abortions sometime this week, or at least scheduling them. And so even if something had happened in Kansas City, the St. Louis clinic is still sort of ramping up. At this point, it's only medication abortions that they're expecting to offer, and only at that clinic on Forest Park. And so Margot Riphagen, who is the CEO, told us this morning that she plans and the organization plans to explore other clinics that they could start offering this at. But right now, it's only going to be that one clinic and only medication abortions, likely sometime in the next week.
So what does this mean then for Planned Parenthood's facility in Fairview Heights, Illinois? I mean, do they still expect to see patients there from out of state?
Oh, 100%. I think if you look at a map of where abortions are either mostly illegal or completely illegal, Illinois is just like a little island. And so you're looking at places like Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, pretty much the entire Deep South that just don't offer abortions at all. They're illegal after Dobbs. And so I think, 2 clinics in Missouri at this point offering medication abortions, obviously it's increasing access, but you're still looking at like a huge chunk of the region where this is kind of the only place that people can go. And so I don't expect there to be much of, I don't expect there to be a dip in providers giving abortions there.
Right.
People could also be coming to Missouri at this point because like I said, in the Midwest and in the South, even in places in some parts of the West, there's really just not a lot of states that offer abortions that allow it to happen. And so even with Missouri allowing it, we're still looking at kind of a regional island of that accessibility.
And that really, I think, brings to the fore in the run-up to the elections in November that there was so much coverage of what was happening with Amendment 3 across the country. We are in the middle of the country, and there are regional issues, but this really, I think, is a story that people have been following all over the U.S.
Oh, 100%. And there were other states that had similar, I want to say Kansas. Again, don't quote me. But yeah, it's very interesting because I think one of the big arguments that proponents of abortion, pro-abortion rights activists say is that this isn't actually something that the people want. It's something that's sort of politically motivated. And when you see a ballot initiative overturn a state ban, that's something that kind of plays into that that argument, I think. That said, Amendment 3 did not pass by a huge margin. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens down the road.
Let's talk about what the response has been. What is it that anti-abortion advocates are saying in reaction to Judge Jung's ruling on Friday afternoon?
I think we're seeing kind of two subjects being brought up, and one is one that you're very used to hearing if you've covered anti-abortion people, which is like this abortion is morally and ethically wrong. A fetus has a soul, or is it's I guess it's a morally fraught practice, I guess. And then another part that you're seeing is organizations such as Coalition Life. Representatives from that organization are saying these regulations are there for a reason, and taking them away puts women at risk, puts fetuses at risk, and sort of the landscape becomes a legal no man's land. And so you're seeing the safety argument, and then you're also seeing the moral argument.
Right.
Yeah.
And that moral argument, Coalition Life Executive Director Brian Westbrook on Friday called the judge's decision, quote, a sad day for anyone who values the sanctity of life. And the group, Westbrook said, remains steadfast in our mission to provide resources, education, and support to women facing unexpected pregnancies. So there is clearly objection for reasons that you have spelled out. This also, I think, points to how this is not a finished thing.
No, it feels like it's never finished. I've covered this for years and years, and something happens, and then there's a legal ruling, and something else happens, and it just it's an argument that continues.
Sarah, your reporting has mentioned that there still needs to be some court action around this issue because it's a pause.
Yes.
What are the next court actions that you're going to be watching for?
Oh, there's a lot. Okay, so what Judge Jung her motions are temporary injunctions, and so that means that they are motions that are sort of a stopgap until there's a larger, kind of more official legal trial that you'll see to overturn this stuff indefinitely. So that's obviously something that I'm looking at. Also, the state could appeal these recent motions from Judge Jung. And that's something that we're also looking at is what kind of happens even in the interim between this temporary injunction and a larger scale, overturning of Amendment 3, or at least an effort to.
Yeah. And again, you've said you've been following this issue for a very long time. What is it that stands out to you, Sarah, from the providers and the people you've met as they've waited for this moment? I mean, is it a win, or is there a different word for it that is more fitting to what the situation is right now?
I think the thing that sticks out to me is that, again, like I said, it never seems to be completely done and dusted. Even when Dobbs happened before that, Planned Parenthood was preparing for that kind of thing by opening up sort of a larger clinic right across the river and finding different ways to make access happen, even for people in states where there's a total ban. And then, we saw Amendment 3, and then we're seeing the challenges to Amendment 3 going down the road. We're looking at challenges in Jefferson City from senators and representatives there to overturn Amendment 3. And so the thing that sticks out to me is that this is never something that ends, at least not in the 7 years that I have been reporting on this. And so, but when it comes down to patients and providers, the people that are ultimately affected are patients, because they're seeing just this, ping-ponging of different rules and regulations. And I think, again, like when Amendment 3 happened, you saw a lot of patients, and from what I heard from providers, people were calling up Planned Parenthood and thinking they could get an abortion. And it's confusing for people to try to untangle. It's confusing even for me as a health reporter, and I do this for my job.
Yeah.
And so when you're looking at people who are, just trying to schedule appointments or trying to even make sense of what's going on legally, there's a lot of work for people to stay on top of and know what's going on.
Yeah. Well, thank you for staying on top of it and talking with us about that.
We try our best.
Sarah Fentem is St. Louis Public Radio's health reporter. Thank you so much for making time to talk with us today, Sarah.
Anytime.
This episode was produced by Danny Wissentowski.
Audio engineering and podcast design by Aaron Dorr.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations, and leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thank you.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
The Gateway brings you the day's news each weekday from around the St. Louis region and the state capitals in Jefferson City.
Our schools are accredited. We don't need this bill.
And Springfield.
How many more years must pass before lawmakers see time is of the essence?
I'm Abby Larico. Join me each weekday for The Gateway on the STLPR app or wherever you get podcasts.